Hello class 10th. Here I am going to start chapter 5, Footprints Without Feet, from your English Supplementary Reader book. The story is written by the great author H.G.Wells. His full name was Herbert George Wells. He was born on 21st September 1866 in England. He is also called the father of science fiction. Let's talk about the theme of the story, The Footprints Without Feet. The story features an eccentric and possibly mad scientist inventor, that is Griffin, who degenerated himself into a lawless man. Griffin, the protagonist here, discovered that human body could become transparent and invisible. But he misused this discovery in another way. He didn't use it for the welfare of the society and humanity. He used it to threaten, trouble and beat the innocent people and kill them. He made illegal entries in stores and shops and stole things from there. He remained unseen or invisible, only he was without clothes. But the moment he put on clothes, he lost his invisibility and could be easily detected by the people around him. Hence, the story gives us a message that misuse of science and its great discoveries can make even the brilliant scientists like Griffin a monster and a threatening, lawless person. Before I start the chapter, here I would like to ask you a simple question. Children, have you ever watched any footprint of a man without feet? I don't think it is possible to find such prints without the imprint of the feet of anyone. That means the man is invisible. So here we are going to start the story about such invisible man. See chapter Footprints Without Feet. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh, muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London? And where was the man? Muddy means full of mud. Imprints means marks due to pressure. So here the story starts with the surprising note of two boys who noticed that there were some fresh, muddy footmarks of some bare feet on the step of a house. They started thinking, what was a man doing without the footmark on the steps, and where he was now, as they found no one there. As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. Further footprints followed one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at last disappeared again. Remarkable means noticeable. Fascinating, that means attracted. Fainter, that means to be dim. Wondering about those footprints of a man who was not visible, their eyes caught sight of another noticeable thing. That was the fresh footmarks of someone, and these footprints were followed by one after another. Then they found these footsteps. These were going down and progressing and moving ahead down the street. The boys followed and they were very much attracted until the muddy impressions they got dim and dim. At last they disappeared. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Transparent, that means invisible. Here these boys never knew that they had been following a scientist who had discovered how to make the human body transparent or invisible. Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. Rare drugs means chemicals or medicines that cannot be easily made. The scientist Griffin, who had worked for a long time to see how to make the human body invisible, he had to carry out with experiment after experiment to get this success. Finally, when he consumed certain drugs which made his body transparent or invisible like a sheet of glass. Brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house to get away without being seen. He had to remove his clothes. Thus, it was that he became a homeless wanderer, without clothes, without money, and quite invisible, until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. Eject means to drive out or compel to leave. Of course, Griffin was a great scientist, but perhaps he was a lawless man. Even his landlord hated him and tried to throw him out of the house. Then, to take revenge upon the man, Griffin had burnt his house, and then he wanted to get away without being seen and without being noticed by anyone. So he removed his clothes, and hence he became the invisible man. Hence, from that day, he became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. But his adventures were by no means over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter. The air was bitterly cold and he could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. Escape means to get away. Adventure means risk. Though Griffin had easily escaped from the boys who were following him, but he had to now undergo many adventures coming up in his way. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander in the chilled city of London. As the winter season had started, now the air was bitterly cold now. He decided to stay inside a store for warmth, as it was quite difficult for a man to survive in such cold weather. So he took the better decision to get now the warmth inside some store. So he made the entry in the big London store. Closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. Expense means cost. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. When Griffin went inside, it was the closing time of the store, so he didn't stop himself for the enjoyment of wearing the clothes and feeding himself free of cost. He started breaking boxes and wrappers and then fitted himself with the warm clothes there. Soon, with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide-brimmed hat, he became a fully dressed and visible person. Wide-brimmed hat, that means wide-bordered hat. Hence, Griffin put on shoes, overcoat, and a hat. He started now looking fully dressed man and thus became again visible. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. Finally, he settled down to sleep on a pile of quills. After warming and dressing himself with the overcoat, Griffin went inside the kitchen, and there he found cold meat and coffee. And after eating that all, he also enjoyed sweets and wine from the grocery shop. And then he slept on the pile of the quilts lying over there. Quilts are the warm covers like blankets. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in good time, all might have been well. As it was, he didn't wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. So it was said till the next morning he slept soundly over there. When the assistants, the helpers of the restaurants, they came and started approaching towards him and woke him up. When he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. Approaching means coming. Panic means to get frightened. When Griffin found they were running towards him, he got frightened. They naturally gave chase. In the end, he was able to escape only by quickly taking off his newly found clothes. So when the assistants also started chasing him, so finally Griffin got escape only but by removing his newly found clothes. So once more he found himself invisible and naked in the chill January air. So once again he found himself invisible and without clothes in the chilled weather of January month. This time he decided to try the stock of a theatrical company in the hope of finding not only clothes but also something that would hide the empty space above his shoulders. Shivering with cold, he hurried to the Drury Lane, the center of the theatre world. After running from the store, Griffin now decided he would visit the Drury Lane, that is the center of the theatre world. He hoped that he would find there not only clothes to warm himself, but also he would get something to cover the empty spaces of the invisibility over his shoulders with something over there. He soon found a suitable shop. He made his way invisible upstairs and came out a little later, wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat. To escape without being seen, he carelessly attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him of all the money he could find. Bandages means bands. Whiskers, these are the hair grown on the cheeks. Carelessly means truly. So here it is told, when Griffin was shivering with cold, he made his way to the Drury Lane, and there he found the suitable shop where he got everything which he wanted. And when he went inside without being noticed by anyone, as he was invisible, he directly went upstairs. And when after some time he came out, he was wearing the band around his forehead and also wearing the dark glasses, false nose, and big bushy side whiskers, and a big hat over his head. And thus, without being seen, he had also attacked truly over the shopkeeper from behind, and he robbed all the money which that man had over there. Eager to get away from crowded London, he took a train to the village of Iping, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. As Griffin wanted to run away from the crowd of the London, he decided he would go to some remote village. So he reached Iping, and there he booked 2 rooms in the local inn. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all the tongues wagging. To set all tongues wagging, that means to let people gossip as an event of a stranger coming and staying in the inn in the winter night. It was not the normal happening in the Iping town. So everybody started gossiping about the unusual appearance of the stranger in their town. Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, made every effort to be friendly, but Griffin had no desire to talk and told her, "My reason for coming to Iping is a desire for solitude. I don't wish to be disturbed in my work. Besides, an accident has affected my face." Solitude means loneliness. Despite his strange looks, Mrs. Hall still made the efforts to be friendly with the guest, but he showed again reluctance to talk. He said clearly that his reason for coming to Iping was only for the want of peace and quietness, and he didn't want that anybody should get him disturbed in his work. He also told her that his face had been affected in an accident, so he has to cover it all day long. Satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, and in view of the fact that he'd paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper. Eccentric means strange or freaky. Irritable temper means short-tempered or angry. Mrs. Hall was satisfied to know that her guest was a strange scientist. In fact, she has got a rent in advance from the guest. She was now ready to ignore all the strange habits and the short temper of the guest, as she has got the payment in advance. But the stolen money didn't last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. And came the time when his whole stolen money was over. He had no cash available for further payment to Mrs. Hall. Then he had to tell lie that he was waiting for a check which could come at any moment. Shortly afterwards, a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Curious means excited. Clergyman, that is a Christian priest. Tripping, that means to move slowly. So here it is told that after some days, something really strange happened in the IPing. The clergyman and his wife, they were aroused early in the morning by some noises in their study room. When they moved slowly downstairs, they heard the chinking sound of the money taken out from the desk of the clergyman. So they were surprised who was taking out the money from that drawer of the desk. Tripping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. Without making any noise and with the poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door. Surrender. Poker is a metal rod that is used to stop fire. Here, now the clergyman got frightened. He became alert. He brought out his poker and took it firmly in his hand, and then he flung open the door and made the shout with the word, "Surrender! Give up!" Then to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains and even up the chimney. There was not a sign of anybody, yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. Amazement means surprise. As we come to know, the clergyman gave the threat with his poker to the thief to surrender. But to his very surprise, when he opened the door, he found no one there. He and his wife searched under the desk, behind the curtains, and even they went up to find inside the chimney. There was no sign of anyone there. But the desk was found open and the housekeeping money, it had gone. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. So the clergyman kept on saying the words the whole day long with the words extraordinary affair. Really, he was shocked by this incident. So he repeated the word. It was really unbelievable. It was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall's furniture. A little later that morning, their condition was not so bad in comparison to the condition of Mrs. Hall's furniture. That happened just a little time after that. So it was really unusual to see their condition. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, and he was furious if anyone entered his room. The opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. Furious means to be extremely angry. Peep, that means to look quickly at something, especially through a narrow opening. So it is told Mrs. Hall and her husband woke up very early in the morning and were surprised to find the guest room was open that day. As generally, the room of the scientist used to remain closed and locked. As he used to get angry if anyone tried to intrude into his room, he never liked any visitor. So this was a good chance to carry on their investigation. So they don't want to miss. First, they peep around the door and found there was no one. The bed clothes were cold, showing that scientists must have been up for some time, and strangers still the clothes and bandages and he always wore were lying about the room. When they checked the bedsheet, they found it seemed to be very cold, which showed that the stranger must have been up for a while. And they found that all his clothes and even his bandages that he used to tie around his face were lying around there inside the room. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Sniffing means to drop air through your nose noisily when you get cold. Dashed means to hit something. So here, when they were making their investigation, suddenly Mrs. Hall, she found a sniffing close to her ear, and suddenly next she found the hat of the griffin which was lying on the bedpost. It suddenly jumped up and hit on her face. And next moment, the chair lying in the bedroom, it also became alive. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam and lock the door after them. Spring means to jump. Slam means to shut hard and loudly. And suddenly the chair of the room, it dashed itself and hit Mrs. Hall in her legs. As both of them were now going to run out of the room with terror, suddenly they found the chair which had turned to be now extraordinary. It pushed them out of the room and then suddenly it shut and locked the room after throwing them out. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs. In hysterics, she was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. Hysterics, it is a wild, emotional and just mad-like reaction. Haunted means the visit of someone frequently. The whole incident has terrorized Mrs. Hall's mind. She got so mad with terror that she was going to fall down the staircase. Then she started believing that there were spirits and ghosts in her inn's room now, and the stranger had caused all this to happen there. And that's why those spirits have entered into her furniture. My poor mother used to sit in that chair. She moaned to think that it should rise up against me now. Moan means to cry with pain or to wail. Now Mrs. Hall started wailing that how the chair which was gifted to her mother, where she used to sit, so how it could go against her and hit her badly like that way. Feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. But witchcraft or not, one news of burglary at the clergyman's home became known. The strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Witchcraft means black magic. Burglary, that means theft. When the neighbors of Mrs. Hall, they came to know about the incident, they gave their review that the whole trouble was caused due to some black magic. But when they also got the news of the theft at clergyman's home, they were now sure that there was the hand of this strange scientist which was staying at Mrs. Hall's inn. So they were sure. So he was now playing the black magic with them in the town. Whether it was black magic or not, suddenly came the news of burglary at the home of clergyman's home. Burglary, just have told, that means theft. So when the people came to know about this theft, now the whole suspicion, it moved to the strange scientist, thus Griffin. Suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. And this suspicion grew more stronger when the stranger produced ready cash for the payment of his rent at the inn, even though he had just told some time back that he didn't have any money and was waiting for a check to arrive. The village constable was secretly sent for. Instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. Mysteriously means in doubtful condition. Now they called for the village constable. But Mrs. Hall could not now control herself. She went directly into the room of the scientist and asked how he had mysteriously came to the empty bedroom and the room that was locked. "I want to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs," she demanded, "and I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room." She inquired from him what he had been doing upstairs with the chairs and the furniture. She also asked him how he had entered inside the empty bedroom that was otherwise locked. The scientist was always quick-tempered. Now he became furious. Quick-tempered, that means short-tempered. Furious means angry. "You don't understand who or what I am," he shouted. "Very well, I will show you." As the scientist was always quick-tempered, short-tempered, now he became angry to hear these comments of Mrs. Hall. He started shouting with the words that they never knew who and what he was in fact. Mr. Jeffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. Now, Mr. Jeffers, the village constable, he reached there. He was surprised to find that he had to now arrest a man without the head. But Jeffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested with or without his head. But Jeffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested with or without his head. Jeffers knew it very well that if he got the warrant from the magistrate to arrest some person, then it is a duty of the police to arrest that man, whether he had the head or he is headless. There followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another. Then it followed a wonderful sight over there. The scientist started throwing his clothes one by one. Hence, he was becoming more and more invisible as he was throwing off one garment after another. Finally, a shirt flew into the air, and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could not see at all. And Griffin removed his shirt. Now he was nowhere to be seen, and thus Jeffers had to struggle to arrest a man who had become now completely invisible. Then he was nowhere to be seen, and thus Jeffers had to struggle a lot to arrest a man who had completely become now invisible. Some people tried to help him but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. At this moment, some people tried to help Jeffers, who was struggling with this invisible man, but they were also hit by the blows from nowhere. Nobody knew from where these blows were coming there. In the end, Jeffers was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist knocked me stone down. Jafar was knocked down during a struggle with the invisible man, but till he got fainted, he tried hard to contain this man who was not seen. There were nervous, excited cries of hold him, but this was easier said than done. Now to see such terrible sight, now the people got nervous and in their excitement they started now shouting with the words to hold this man. But it was not easier to catch any man who was not visible. Griffin had shaken himself free and no one knew where to lay hands on him, as Griffin had freed himself from the hold of Jafar. Now no one in the public know how to hold the man who was invisible. Hence once again, this lawless, overambitious and selfish scientist was free to use his invisibility to trouble, frighten, beat and rob the innocent people in his life. I hope you have all understood the chapter. Thank you very much.